Argue both sides. I can argue both sides. Well, I don't know about equally, but I can debate.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks especially to those who brought food that we might have the time to enjoy some fellowship and some a nice meal on the way in. I'm excited to continue with the Being Called series, and I'm delighted that Randy Nelson is in the house with us tonight. Speaking of in the house, Randy was on the search committee that called me to be the rector here at Ascension. He came all the way out, hardship as it was, to Hawaii to make sure that there wasn't anything too peculiar about what I was doing out there before the official invitation was made. He tried to talk other search committee participants into coming out a week early, in fact, just to hang out. We did make sure he got good fish and good pie while he was on the island. But I have to credit Randy. As I arrived in Dallas, he invited me into his home and put up with me until I was able to buy a house. We joked that it was all went by in a blur. He sometimes jokes about it was such a great year. It wasn't a full year. I will credit Randy with taking me to Torchy's Tacos for the very first time, but he didn't stop there. He introduced me to a bunch of great restaurants, a bunch of great authors and books. We've enjoyed many meals and great conversations, and he's never hesitated to help not only me, but so many people I've watched him help over the years. Perhaps one of his greatest skills that I've observed in him throughout the time I've known Randy is he almost always has something that is a beautiful compliment about anybody we're talking about. And it's that's hard to accomplish, especially given the sincerity with which he shares those. And I admire that trait in him. And I know that he'll have great things to share with us. So without further ado, we'll welcome Randy up to share what he's got for us.
Thank you. All right. After all that, I hope it doesn't just go downhill from there.
Never complimented me.
And it's easy to find things to compliment people when you hang around good people, and I do that, and you guys are many of the good people that I've been fortunate enough to run into and encounter. The topic about your calling is pretty broad, and I have a little bit of anxiety about, do I really understand what I'm supposed to talk about? But I made notes and more notes, and so I have things to talk about. But if I'm kind of prattling along and this is not stuff that is what you'd really like to hear, I'm open, very much open to somebody raising their hand and saying, yeah, but how about so-and-so? And so please don't hesitate to do that if I just kind of...
You're not used to talking without someone yelling objection?
Well, that's... I'm used to finding people objectionable as I'm talking. So, I have spoken about you guys to the church where I am now and talked a little about the history. And it's interesting looking at the people who I've been talking about, and particularly in the context of calling, because you guys, my calling is really wrapped up with your calling, because I wouldn't be here but for you. I mean, I'm going to run through this a little bit, and I'm not just making that up. I mean, that is absolutely the case. And I did find something, one of the quotes, I always like quotes to give. There's smart people that say smart things. But with respect to a calling, one of the things I read recently was from a guy named Alexander Schmemann, which I'm sure you're familiar with, highly regarded Orthodox theologian. And this is one of the things that he says, is everyone who in baptism was joined with Christ and made a member of his body is ordained. and which is another way of saying that everyone who's made a decision to be a follower of Jesus has been called. And we all are part of a royal priesthood. But for your being called and forming the body of Christ that you formed, I wouldn't have had the experience that I had when I came here, I think it's 13 or 14 years ago. And I have not been involved with a church for most of my adult life. And it wasn't that I wasn't interested. I was interested in Christianity, but I'd grown up in the Southern Baptist Church. And when I graduated from high school, I really had no desire to continue with that. And I don't mean that to be as negative as that may sound, but and I'm sure a lot of it had just had to do with the usual thing of everybody leaving home and needing to grow up and getting away from your parents and what they had brought you up in. And there was certainly some of that. But the church for many years just was not credible for me. And so through college and then on, a lot of my energy and attention was devoted towards developing a career and practicing law, which I did. But there was always something that I think because of the parents that I had had, who were fantastic. If I've had any blessing in my life, it's been the parents that I've managed to finagle somehow I'd get. And it's only increased as I've gotten older, and I just realized that that was not the experience of a lot of people to have these loving, sweet, Christian-hearted people as your parents. And it's taken me a long time to really fully appreciate how fortunate I was. But I think because of that experience, I kind of knew I had a set point of this is what life is supposed to be like. And I go off and, go through college and start a career and in trial practice. It's pretty sharp elbowed stuff that goes on. I mean, people are playing for keeps, very competitive, like other jobs are too. So it's not just my job. I know everybody's job is tough. But there was just something I couldn't get away completely because I just knew there was something that was missing, and that sounds kind of cliche to say, but there was. And so I look in a lot of different places to kind of fill that space, and did a lot of things that kind of got at it a little bit. A couple of things I did was I did a Outward Bound course, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with Outward Bound, but it's a fantastic organization. And I've always recommended people that if you have a kid that is kind of wandering around and had found himself, sign him up in an Outward Bound program, which I think are fantastic. I did the first one when I was close to 30, I think, and it was a profound experience that I had doing that. I did another one later. And then a couple of things I did that were also kind of attempts to get that to that place was Vision Quest. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with Vision Quest, but I think it's an American Indian tradition where when you become a certain age, you go off and you're separated from your tribe and you spend some time alone. And the idea is that you search for a vision of, what the next stage of your life is going to be. And I did a couple of those. The first one I did was up in Canada, very far north. Remember, we took a float plane and you went up there a good ways. And it's a place where you could actually jump into the lake and start drinking the water. I don't know if you could still do that, but it was that pristine and that far removed. And it involved a one-day solo. I had a canoe, and I canoed off to this little island. You spent 24 hours there by yourself. And that was somewhat impactful. Part of it also had a sweat lodge that you don't hear as much about those because people die doing them. And and I came close. Yeah, depending on how well they know what they're doing. But it kind of gets you to a point because of the heat and the intensity of it is it almost forces you to pray. I mean, if you're going to pray, a few minutes or hours or days in that thing, however long it was, it brings you to a point. And every once in a while I look back and go, well, what was I doing? I mean, who was this person doing this stuff? But I think it was that hole or something that I couldn't quite fill. And then I did a second one. The second one later was in the Utah Canyonlands. And it's an organization called Animas Valley Institute. They do a fantastic job of setting these up. And it involved a 4-day solo fast. So you park yourself somewhere for 4 days, and the only thing you can have is a sleeping bag and a water pump. And you sit there, and you only get up when you need to go get water and bring it back and drink it. And otherwise, you're sitting there. And I remember wanting to have an experience of God when I was there. That was, I think, part of what I was searching for. And it didn't happen. But at the end of the 4 days, you come back and join the group, and there'd been some processing work before we went out for the solo, and there was processing afterwards. And I know that when I got back, I didn't have a vision of God, but I had a very clear vision of myself and what I was doing. And I know that sounds vague, but I remember in sharing to the group, I said something to the effect that I said, if you were in Dallas and you were to see me, what you would see is a guy getting up in the morning, leaving a nice house, getting in a nice car, wearing a nice suit, driving downtown, going into a nice building, getting with some guys at lunch at a nice restaurant, having a nice meal, going back, working a nice office, and coming back to the nice house in a nice car. And you would see this and you think, well, guys, he's got it going. He's got a nice car, done this, done this. And what it occurred to me was, and if you saw that, you would miss the whole thing. And by that, I meant I came in contact with, there's a part of me that was not being attended to. And so that's kind of a set point I can go back to. And I remember who that person was as I was having that experience of there's something else here that I'm missing or I'm not attending to. And so those were at least some of the experiences I had. There's a book that you might find interesting. It's what do we call that? Now, it'll come to me in a minute. It's called The Tale of the Rusty Knight, I think. Does anybody know that book? The Adventures of Rusty Knight. It's an allegory. That's what I was trying to think of. It's written by some guy. I think he was a playwright, movie producer, or something in Hollywood. And he wrote a book, and basically it's the story of a guy who goes out in the world of business, and he has a wife and a kid, and every day he's slugging it out and doing the stuff, jousting in the business world. And slowly but surely, there's a suit of armor that attaches itself to him, and it becomes more and more confining. And the Rusty Knight is just kind of over the course of this, as he's becoming more and more removed from himself, from being able to communicate and have a close relationship with his wife and his kids. His tears are rusting the suit of armor that's been put on him. And I remember reading that, and I thought, yeah, I mean, I think that describes kind of what was going on to a certain extent. Is I had acquired a suit of armor because I'm out there, slugging it out in the legal world. But again, that part inside that was not being attended to, that was just kind of there, was missing something. And so fast forward 20 years after this Vision Quest thing, I've been in a relationship, and I kind of thought, well, this is going to be the deal, and was thinking that it was a deal, but it turned out not to be. And so, and anybody here that's been through breakups in relationships, you know how it is. You're lonely, you're sad, and all that kind of stuff. And so that was me. And I had read something in some little newspaper about this church Ascension that had activities going on, outreach activities. And I thought, I'm going to go check it out. And so I came here. And whimsically, I tell the story. I came and I just never stopped coming. I just came, but there's a lot more to it than that, because I had been to churches on occasion, and I know part of it was the state I was in at the time. I was in a empty state, but there was also something about this place that was different, and it made an impact, made a story. And I tell you what's kind of funny is, because as fond as I was of Kay and Andrew, everything that you always hear about what you're supposed to do at church, the welcome, invite, connect, and all that kind of stuff, there wasn't any of that. I mean, I finally ended up calling Andrew one day and just saying, hey, can I take you to lunch? And he said, and so we met at lunch, and he said, oh yeah, we've been thinking about trying to figure out who you were or whatever, because I'd just been sitting kind of back there by myself. But the truth is, that's what I needed to do. I had gone to a church, I won't say what church it was, but another Episcopal church, and I had somebody almost run me over as I was trying to get in my car with a coffee mug that had the church logo on it. I mean, there was just almost a desperation in them wanting to get me in, and I didn't need that. I kind of needed exactly what I had here, was just kind of the ability just to take it in and see what was going on. And, but anyway, so we met, and then from there, the people here were friendly. I mean, people would come up and say hi to me, and of course, I remember Perry Lyons for sure, all that. So the people were friendly, but it wasn't like they were pouncing on me to try to wrestle me in here. And part of me thinks it may have been I had just kind of had that look about me in my armor stage that people were, I think I'll stay away from that guy. I wasn't a much approachable person. But anyway, I came, and I've tried to think. I've thought many times about what was it about this place and that struck me. And one of the first things I remember is seeing, and this talks this. It's hard for me to believe that this is where I was in my mind at that time, but I remember the people kneeling at the altar to receive communion, and just having to get my mind around what are they doing? I mean, people. I remember thinking about the people are getting up on Sundays and coming here to do this thing, and what's the payoff? In that time I was thinking in transactionally, like you do this because you get that and whatnot. I couldn't see the payoff of people kneeling at the altar, and so that just struck me that here were people doing this, and slowly kind of dawned on me, and what they were here for to do was to become closer to Christ. And like, wow, people do that. And then the next thing that struck me, I think, was the diversity of the people. I was, and that didn't hit me right off the bat, but I remember thinking apparently most places I go to, it's people of one race, one age group, one socioeconomic group, and they're all just kind of with their own people doing things. And then I come here and I see, and at that time, we had the Nigerian group, and I guess the Dinkas were here also. And so it was stark just seeing the people kneeling side by side, different races, young and old, people that look like, dressed nicely, other people not as nice, just different groups. And I just remember thinking, man, this must be what the church is really supposed to be about, is they're not here because they're making business contacts or because this is whatever. They're here for some other reason. And that really made an impact on me. I'm trying to kind of keep this in order of how it happened, but it just worked on. Well, I know one thing that happened is, and I had watched a PBS special on the abolitionist, and I remember watching that and seeing that there were people that made really significant sacrifices to keep that going for that movement. There was one guy in particular, I think was a publisher, the newspaper or whatever, and people would, they burned his place and whatever. I mean, people really suffered, and it really struck me, who cares that much to do that? And then part of the story was, of course, that some of those people that were making those sacrifices were Christians, and they were motivated because of their relationship with Christ. But it really impacted me that when I tried to think, where does, that caring like that comes from someplace. It doesn't just happen. And so, just that made an impact on me. And so here I am, I keep coming. And I remember there was a newcomers dinner. And for some reason, I remember your face, Susan, because we were out here. And I don't know if you remember this, you may or may not, but for some reason, I started talking about my experience at Ascension. And I remember one of the things I said was I had heard about Mother Teresa impact on people, and apparently somebody had actually measured things like galvanic response or something, heart rate and blood pressure and stuff, and her presence actually had an effect on people. And I remember saying, I said, I've been coming here, and I said, I've read about the Mother Teresa effect, but this is ridiculous. And that's exactly the word I used. And I mean, because I really could not understand what was going on. But it was like just my soul just went, wow, it's not all about the competition, about the fights in lawsuits and appearances and all that kind of stuff. There's a place to come where people are actual human beings, or something like that was going on. And I, as I was talking, my eyes, I actually started, I was crying. I don't want to say it. And I want to say, well, it's moisture in my eyes, but no, I was crying, and I think, and I always felt like Kay was trying to kind of save me from embarrassing myself or whatever. But she came and she stood up and she put her hand on my shoulder and she said something to the effect of the group said, God is obviously doing something in Randy's life. And I remember thinking, yeah. I mean, it didn't occur to me that God did things, and it certainly didn't occur to me that God might do something with me. It just, and as I've thought about that later, I thought, no, I think that is what was going on. And that's hard to say because it's just like, really? But yeah, I think it did. So you guys, because you had answered your call, you came together and you formed this body of Christ that made an impact on me. Thank you. changed my life. And I was thinking this past week about that passage in Matthew, where two or more gathered in my name, I'll be in the midst of you, or something to that effect. And I was thinking, I don't know what I had thought that meant before, but it had to be the group of you coming together for that purpose, for it to make that kind of impact on me. Because we could have all been together at the Kiwanis Club or something, but it wouldn't have had that kind of impact. I mean, there really is something about that. And I'm very reluctant to talk about this because I still don't really understand this, but I did have an experience, and I know where I was sitting in there, but I just come back from communion, and I sat down, and something came, and for a minute and a half or 2 minutes, I saw you, I think, as Christ sees you. I would just look out, and I was just thinking, I'd just look at somebody and go, I really love that person. And I thought, what is this? And I thought, well, I'll take this for a test drive. So I looked over here, and I'd see somebody else and went, no. And it was as if I had incorporated this experience, this mind, that for a minute, I was given a mind to see this is what it really could be if we could see through Jesus' eyes the way things really are. And it made a huge, I didn't know what to do with it, and I still don't. And I've never talked about this publicly. It's the first time I've ever said anything, but I'm feeling like you're with me here. But that was a huge impact, and I go back to that experience over and over and over, and I tried to replicate it. I'd go sit in the same spot. I say, all right, I'm ready. Come on, let's go. And it's never happened again. And I have no explanation of why it happened then, but I think I was just open and I was ready. And yeah, thank you. Yeah. So to bring this thing up on long, I was on the search committee, and I did make the sacrifice to go to Hawaii. If it makes anybody feel better, the trip there and back took longer than the time we actually had there in Hawaii. And there were very peculiar things about you. I immediately liked Paul and his family, and so when he accepted, it was not a sacrifice on my part at all to ask him to stay at my house. He needed a place to stay until his family got here. And looking back, I think that there's more going on. There's so much going on between all of us all the time. But I needed to rub up against one of these Christian people to kind of see, like, what is this, and what's this about? Is this really credible? I think that's been my whole thing throughout. Is I don't want to mess with this if it's not for real. I think that's part of what I had the trouble with the Baptist church. There's just, I couldn't, it didn't make sense to me and whatnot. I probably have softened on that over the course of the years, but this felt real, and Paul was such a good experience because he's not, if he had come in and been somebody where I saw him here acting differently than when he came down the stairs in the morning for breakfast or something, I'd have gone, oh, okay, he's like me. He's kind of, but he wasn't. I mean, Paul is who he is. I mean, this is how he is. And I think that was a blessing to be able to see somebody and realize, no, you can do this and it will change your life, and you can become a person who is more Christ-like. And so I was very happy about having him there, and it was a great experience. And then it was Paul who first said something to me, and I think he was talking about his dad. He said, had said his dad had said something to him. And I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it was like, my dad said, has Randy ever said anything about being a deacon, or has he considered being a deacon, or something to that effect? And it hadn't registered with me. But once he said it, it kind of planted the seed, and I thought, well, that's maybe something I should look into. And so I started the discernment process, and I was really just kind of waiting to hear a whistle, offsides or something, get out of here. Some sign come up and go, detour, you get off this, but it never happened. And I just kind of kept going, and the whole discernment process was such a joy too. We had a great group of people that were really committed. They gave their time to it, the whole process, and again, it just made me proud to think, wow, this is something maybe I can do. And when I think of a calling, it was not like God saying, "Hey, Randy, man, we really need you. Come here, Randy, come." It wasn't that kind of a deal. The way I thought of it is Ascension Church was doing a broadcast, and I happened to walk in front of the speaker, and I happened to be in a position or in a place in my life to listen and pay attention. But because you guys were sending out, I heard it, and I don't have experiences, maybe some people do, of God speaking to them directly and stuff. Experiences I have are always God mediated through other people. I mean, it's the beauty of other people, seeing how people are and wanting. There's something inside, I think, all of us, that when we see a really good person, our heart goes, there's something there. And I just recently was reading about truth, goodness, and beauty, and how those are qualities of God that our souls respond to. And I thought back, I was thinking, that's what happened to me at Ascension. I saw truthful people doing a lot of good, and I did have a sense of the beauty of the space, the stained glass, the stone, the beauty of the music. Thank you, Mark. And those things, I think our souls really thrive on and crave truth, goodness, and beauty. And particularly in a time like this, where do you find truth? Where do you find goodness? Where do you find beauty? And I found it was you. It's here. So, one other thing I guess I'll say about a calling, there's a guy named Howard Thurman. Some of you guys may be familiar with, the mystic guy, and he's famous for a quote that he said, and I think this applies to a calling to a certain extent. He said, "Don't look for what the world needs. Look for what makes you come alive, and do that. What the world most needs are people fully alive." And so I like that, because I don't feel like God had to have me by any means to be a deacon or do anything. I think he just I found people in whom I come alive, and I wanted to be with those people and be more like those people. And in my case, those people were you people, and so it kind of developed from there. So I think I've used my time, and
Thank you.
yeah.
Great time.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any questions. I probably said more than you want to hear already. Do.
Questions for Randy?
Yeah.
Just one quick question. Pretty interesting. You were speaking of that hole in your soul that you experienced. In my world, in the mechanical systems, problems happen when a vacuum takes problems in mechanical systems, and it has to be rectified so that you can, the process can get on flow. But so in the big, so something, it sounds like coming here, kind of feel that vacuum in your soul. And so the question is, at what point did you feel like that vacuum had been filled that led you to pursue your deaconship?
I'd say it's still, I mean, I can't say that I arrived at some point. I think it's just been a process that continues. And I mean, I still am moved by things, and I go, wow, that's, you know, I want to be like that or that person. And so I know, I think I understand what you're asking. I'd say it's just a continuing process. The Orthodox Church, here's something I can tell you about, is one of the things I think one of my problems with the Southern Baptist Church is they were so back then, I don't know if they still are, so bent on having people come down and make a public decision for Christ. Always centered around walking the aisle. You feel a lot of pressure. I was 9 years old. I felt the pressure to go down and do that. And it felt like a little bit of emotional manipulation to make that happen. I like the fact the Orthodox Church doesn't talk about being saved as if it's a one-time thing. Got it done, let's go. They talk about I'm being saved. And it's a continuing process. And that's how I feel about it. I feel like I'm being saved. I'm in the process. And hope it just continues.
Doesn't all have to be questions. Sometimes it's just a hug.
Yeah, that's worth or two questions. I think.
Randy, I appreciate it. You kind of presented it as, you know, Ascension being who they are is part of how you recognize calling and Christ. It occurs to me that many of the people that you were feeling that from might not even have been aware of their calling. They were just doing. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Like
just being
stepping up, stepping in, stepping forward, doing whatever.
I mean, I know on a couple of occasions I've talked about it, but and I know Susan was one of the people I talked about. Just I watched you work tirelessly. I see Doug Tabor pushing wheelchairs and doing stuff, and I mean, I shouldn't even talk because I could say something about everybody probably, but yeah, I don't think people do know the impact, and I think that's the beauty of being the church. I mean, just being the church, people need to know that places like this exist, and we take it for granted because now I've been in this, and it's hard for us to imagine what's going on in the minds of people out there who are struggling mightily in their lives, and you know, there'll be a time where they'll come into a place like this, and it'll make all the difference in the world. And that's our calling. That's, as the church, that's who we're to be. And so never underestimate and one of the things you can just think about is if you took all the churches away. What if the buildings that we had to look at were strip malls and banks and stuff like that? Just take away. I was in France. I was telling somebody not long ago and just looked at these cathedrals and it's just stunning. Look at the years of effort that went into making these beautiful, beautiful structures, and then realizing the inspiration for that was a single person's life that inspired them to do that. And, you know, here we are, and this ain't shabby either, you know. So, yeah.
Any other questions for Randy?
Yeah.
I guess my experience has been that you often don't know until later. Look back and you go, that was a pivotal moment in my life. I feel that you felt that way too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you do kind of look back and go, oh, that was what was going on, because lots of times you're so caught up in it at the moment, you can't see it. It's been great. being with you guys.